they say, well, look at this over here. And they direct my attention to this, again, the brightest light. Again, sort of like that window, but now it's in space. And it's this, I can tell it's like a cluster of lights actually, but it's shining as like one bright giant light. And it has that same feeling of like, I just want to be there. That is all that matters right there. That is the center of all things. And that's what I call it now, is the center of all things.
Welcome in. I'm Kimberly. I'm so glad you're here today. We have an exciting guest for you. But before we get started, if you're enjoying this content, go ahead and click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. That way you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. And if you'd like to stay in touch, we do send out a very short, very sweet, very informative email newsletter on Friday morning. It's filled with great information and what we think are the important elements going on the planet around the world. It's very short, very sweet, very free. The link is in the description box down below. I think you're going to love it. So let's hop into our conversation today. We're talking with Lindsey Scharmyn. Lindsey, welcome in.
Oh, thank you, Kimberly. It's so nice to be here. I'm excited for our conversation today.
And I am so excited too. I know a little bit about Lindsey's story. It's absolutely fascinating. I have a ton of questions, so I am going to give her a chance to talk to begin with before I start peppering her with all the curiosities I have about her story. Lindsey, one of the things I know about you is that you kind of came in with your, sensitivities online with your gifts rocking and rolling. I know we all have the gifts. Not all of us are able to access them. Why don't you start with what was happening to you as a young girl, and then let's talk a little bit about the OBEs that you had that are pretty significant.
Yeah, I would love to. And thank you for the opportunity. And I really, the more I grow in my own understanding of myself and who I am and where I am and what we're doing here, right? The more I sort of piece together even deeper layers of the story. And so I would encourage anyone listening to really consider that there was perhaps more in your life also going on than you maybe always give yourself credit for. Because some of it, it's not like I ever forgot anything, but some of it I understood more deeply as time went on. And so one example of that is I used to just wander around, in our giant 5 acres of field and all the forests surrounding it and all of this open space I had as a child. And I would just wander by myself and I would be talking to myself constantly. But when I look back, I really understand I was being talked back to also. I was actually having a conversation. And I see this as some of my guides and allies already connecting with me really early on. I even had sort of personifications of them and ideas of who they were, but I was told that was imaginary friends and I was told they're not real. And, so part of me just thought of it as talking to myself. And I would sing to myself and talk to myself, but I would get inspiration and I would get information and I would get understanding. And this is when I'm 3, 4, 5, that I can even remember. I also had really powerful dreams my whole life. And I've always had very powerful dreams. And I even to the point where my family would remark about how heavily I slept and how hard I was to wake up. And that sometimes they'd have to literally shake me and like yell at me to get me to wake up because I had such a rich dream life and dream world. And that was part of my intuition and psychicness and connecting, with the other side, whatever you might call it, also. And I didn't know that, there's no one there to tell me what's going on or how it's all supposed to go. So it was not something I was really deeply understanding.
I want to
Yeah.
ask a quick question now
Yeah.
about that. I have a daughter that sleeps like that. Honestly, it's like you have to put a mirror under her nose to make sure there's still someone in there. Do you think that you were actually out of your body at those times?
I do. And I actually, I teach dream courses now and I teach what I call dream walking and going deeper into the dream state and using the dream state to your advantage, being conscious in the dream state, lucid, astral traveling, all of these things. And I would say that we're all out of our body actually throughout our entire lives pretty consistently and that all people have this connection and that doesn't mean you're going to recall it and it doesn't mean it's going to last the whole night and but it's happening to everybody. And it's just one of those things. Again, we all have our psychic intuitions. We all have our, oh, I don't know if I should do this. I don't feel it. And then some reason comes out, oh, wow, I'm really glad I didn't do that. I'm glad I trusted my gut, right? We all have these things. And even if we feel like we can't access them fully, we can move towards that side of things. So I do think that I was traveling out of body. And I think that my siblings were too. And I don't know that they know that.
Right. So you were very, very connected as a youngster. What did anything happen prior to your OBEs that kind of made your family pause or created a curiosity in yourself about what you were perceiving as opposed to what the people around you were perceiving?
I don't think so. It's a really good question. Not that I can think of right now, but I know that I was looked at as very precocious, very intelligent, very advanced. And I can look back and see that people would sometimes be like, how did she know that? Or that's where I was going with this, or that's what I was about to say. And she just like knew. So I can see that, but I don't know that it was ever conscious for them, right? There's so many of these things too that can happen to any of us that will just explain away. Like, oh, that was just whatever, fill in the blank. And we just dismiss it. And that's why I also say, when we look back with more depth at our life, so we can see these deeper layers actually that were always there, that we maybe just passed off.
Yeah, and outside the paradigm of what we're taught when we come in. So if we are outside of that narrative and you perceive yourself as a spiritually connected individual, things start looking a lot different.
Yeah, and I really had that feeling as well, and I didn't necessarily have words for it or know what to call it, but I just understood, all people are valuable, nature has intelligence and consciousness, and God exists, love is all there is, we have souls, we are beyond this body, but I didn't have words for any of that, but it just seemed obvious to me. And so as I grew up, as many of us do, I got really confused. Like, what, adults don't know this? Or well, like what's wrong with them, or why can't they remember, or why are they acting this way? And things got more and more confusing as time went on because it's just things that are so clear to me are not clear to everyone else.
Mhm. Did you find yourself kind of shutting down your abilities?
Yeah, and I think that's another thing, right? When people tell you like, "Oh, those are just imaginary friends, it's not real," or, "Oh, that's not possible, this isn't how life is," or, "Oh, that's magical thinking," or, "You're dreaming," or, "You just don't understand, you're naive." You do start to sort of question like, "Well, what am I weird? Am I crazy? Am I making things up?" And yeah, that's a really hard crucible to go through, right? When we come
Mhm.
back, I think eventually, whenever that is for any of us, we start to realize like, oh, I've always sort of known. I just have this doubt, right? And have this fear and I have this disbelief. And those were all things that were instilled or installed by our culture, by our society, by our institutions. But if we can move beyond that, we can see like we just have this connection. We just have this information within us and around us and at our fingertips. And we have these skills.
Yeah, and we all do.
Yeah.
We all do. It's just some of us are a little better at it than others. I would
Yeah.
love to have your skill set. So let's move into, I know you had a couple of profound NDE or OBE experiences, kind of the same as an NDE.
Yes.
Can you talk about those and go into detail because they're fascinating? And I'd love to hear just the reality of the experience for you.
Yeah. They're so fascinating to me too, and it wasn't until a handful of years ago that somebody, invited me on an NDE panel, and I was like, "Well, I haven't had an NDE." And they're like, "Oh, no, I've heard your experiences. Those are NDEs." I'm like, "Okay, sure. Let's call them that." And they're not wrong because I was out of body and I was on that sort of other side, and a lot of components of what I experienced are similar to what people experience when they have NDEs. So that was fascinating for me to understand as well. Again, a deeper layer sort of clicked into place, right? But yeah, the first one, you know, that I recall was going out of body and being in a just infinite nothingness. And I've actually heard people describe this too. And they usually describe it as just like that it's terrifying because there's nothing. But I like loved it. I was like, oh wow, this is pure freedom, this emptiness. And I kind of wonder looking back too, because when we're empathic, we're sensitive, or we are always sort of connected. And maybe that's a bit overwhelming in a lot of cases. Crowds are overwhelming and a lot of life is overwhelming. We have stronger emotional response to things than some other people have. And so maybe it was that just nothing, right? Maybe that just felt so good to me to finally feel that. But for whatever reason, this did not scare me. It didn't seem negative. I was very excited, actually. There was a high level of lucidity. And I know people probably have said this phrase a million times, but it's really true that it's realer than real. Like, it's more solid and more present and more full of saturated consciousness than waking life even. So there's something about that that's just a more intense way of being, and I think that so exciting and feels so good also. And, in this space, I eventually noticed there was just, like, the tiniest dot of light, and I was like, "Well, if there's a tiny dot of light, there's something over there, right?" And otherwise, there's no real relative direction or space or anything. There's just nothing. It's just black forever. But I saw this little dot of light and I got even more excited. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go there." And I started moving there. And I had had, different levels of out of body experience before. And so moving in that state is really interesting because a lot of times you can just be where you want in an instant just because you think of being there. And either way, it's very quick. However far you're going, it's like much faster than physical travel, right? But in this, I was, like, moving as fast as I thought I could, and this light was barely getting bigger. So I was like, "Well, that's so far away. How far away is that? I have no idea how this can be this far away." And at the same time as I'm sort of noticing how long it's taking me to even get even a little bit of progress, I also become aware that there's sort of some other consciousness that is noticing that I'm here and that is maybe coming sort of after me. And again, this doesn't feel scary to me. It's almost mischievous, like if your dog gets out the door and knows it's not supposed to, and it knows you're coming too. Like no one's scared, but he's also going to run as fast as he can and stay outside. It was kind of like that. I was like, oh, I'm going to keep going. It was trickstery, right? And so I just kept going. I kept going faster and faster. And now I'm putting all of my willpower and all of my energy into going as fast as I can towards this light because I know I have a time limit. I know whatever this other consciousness or entity is going to come and grab me and throw me back in my body or whatever's going on. And so I'm rushing, rushing, rushing. It's getting slowly bigger, bigger, and bigger. And it's starting to fill up part of my visual field. And it's just this intense light. It's so beautiful. And it's pulling me towards it. Like I can't wait to get there. I can just tell something amazing is in that light. And I get all the way and it's getting bigger and bigger. And I'm nearly at it. And I see that it's a window. When I get to the window, I'm, like, up against it, palms and face, like, peering in. I can't go through the window for some reason, but on the other side is I even feel it right now, it's like this sigh of relief. It's just the most beautiful land of, like, gold and honey. There's hills, everything's shining, everything is just beautiful and full of vitality, like, pure life, and I have this feeling in that moment, like, I just want to be there. Like, I just want to live there, forever. Why can't I get through this window? Why am I on the other side of it? And that's, when I finally get caught up with, and what I now know is my spiritual guide grabs me and just like, "Nope, not yet. Like, not for you, right? Like, you've got stuff to do still, like, time to go back." And I go back to my body and, this maybe also is the first time where I feel this, and I've felt it many times since, and I think this is really familiar too to a lot of people who astral travel or go out of body or have near death experiences, is this profound sadness, that this life isn't that place, that place does exist, and we can and do go there and spend time there, and that this is so weak, right? It's so empty in comparison. You think about like the most joy you've ever felt, and that place is infinitely more impressive than that. It's hard to even describe. There's really no words for it. And this just feels empty in comparison. And it's not like I have this death wish or this, right? Like I'm not going to force myself back into that place, but I still have this knowing that that is so much more full and rich than this place, and that makes it kind of hard sometimes, and definitely it was hard for a while after that to just go through normal life and pretend like right, that this is all there is, and And it's hard too because no one around you realizes, and you can't really tell them because you do, and they're like, "Oh, that's a really cool dream." And it's like, "Well, it wasn't a dream though." But you can't make someone else know that, right? People have to know it themselves. They have to experience it themselves and really give themselves that gnosis by doing so, and so it's hard. It's hard in many ways, but it was also beautiful and life-changing to have sort of that confirmation, right? You always sort of suspect, like, we're souls, there's something else, all of this, and then you actually see it and experience it, and now you know.
Yeah. How did you integrate that? I mean, I can understand when you talk about it, Lindsay, I get such a longing,
Yeah.
such a longing. And it brings up to me the reality of how difficult this system is that we're in. It's challenging. How and to experience that beauty and then come back here. How did you get to a point where you even wanted to get out of bed in the morning after that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It is longing is a great word for it. Like, I cannot wait to go back. And I've had many times in my life where, negative things are going on or I fall into depression or whatever, and I have this same longing comes back and I just say like I just want to go home because that's home. And it's not
Yeah.
just home for me, it's home for all of us. And I just want to go home, and people think I'm talking about my mom's house, which is also a very nice place to go when you're upset. But no, I'm talking about that feeling. And there really is nothing that compares. And I shouldn't really say that because it's not true. It's when we do have loving connection with anything, it does recreate that. It's slight, it's small, it has like no real comparison, but it's the same. And you get just enough of it to kind of go on, right? So I was so lucky that I was so guided to continuously have just enough of those really profound, really true connections with, even if it's like my dog who is my best friend, or with a tree, or with a moment with the sunrise, or with another person, a friend. And those moments I think really just help keep you going. And I also, I guess, have just always known like I have this mission, right? Like I've come here for a reason, and it's to bring as much love and truth and clarity to people as I possibly can. And so even as you're sort of depressed and upset, that pretty much anyone you can connect with will not understand. Right? And there's something sad too about seeing how far away many people seem from even understanding that this other world exists or is possible. That gets really hard too, because 'cause you're like, "Well, how will we ever cross this abyss?" Right? Like, how will we ever fill this chasm with something good, true, and beautiful so that we can all sort of make it across the bridge to be reconnected with this birthright of ours? And that's really difficult too. But like I said, I would just get enough connections, enough moments, enough sort of signs or messages to just keep going. and it's and I feel very grateful for that. But I also feel like that's true again for everyone when you're really questioning or doubting or wondering if you can keep going on, like something happens, like some message gets through, right? Or some connection happens to keep you remembering you're doing this for a reason.
Yeah, beautifully said. So your next OBE was pretty spectacular, and I want one just like that.
Yeah. Yeah, this one was also very intense, and this one I will say, maybe like a harder time integrating actually because it's so fantastical. It just didn't seem to me like it was possible, and it's still kind of overwhelming to even consider. But basically in this one was taken up in a craft, and in my experience and understanding, this is not a physical craft. The My guides and allies are, like all of ours, in my opinion, interdimensional beings of highly ascended consciousness, right? And they're here to help and to guide us, and space and time are not physical either. And so when we're moving around in this craft, I just think we're moving around in consciousness. But I know other people have different ideas about this. So when I'm in this craft, it looks like I'm in an ET ship to me, right? Like I'm in a big space, and it is looking exactly like a ship would look, I think. And you know, we're moving through the solar system at first. And at first I'm just sort of looking, the sides of the craft can be opaque or transparent, just depending on what you want, right? If you want to feel like you're in a ship, they're opaque. If you want to see what's out there in the universe, they're transparent. And So I'm, feeling like we're just floating past Mars and Venus, and oh, look, there's Jupiter, and here's Saturn. Again, this is sort of like the light in that darkness. This is like just like really exciting to me. And I'm not even really paying attention to my guides and allies who are right behind me like the whole time. They're just like dressing, right? Like I'm not talking with them, or I'm just like, wow, look at that. Oh, look at this. And oh, and I think this is part of what makes us endearing to them is we're just like little puppies or little kittens, and we're just like, right, still learning how to manage our emotions and everything. So, anyways, we're floating through the solar system, and again, that same feeling. It's realer than real. I'm more present. I'm more lucid. I'm more conscious than I am in waking life. It's the details are everywhere. It's very intense, and all the emotions are there. They're very intense, and flying through the solar system is very intense. And, I don't know if anyone listening understands necessarily. I don't know, there's probably some young people and some old people listening, but young people might not realize we didn't really have the internet. And so we didn't really have this
Yeah.
overabundance of understanding of what the solar system looks like or
We went
was
to the library.
right. And we had pictures and books, and like that was the one shot you got of, right? And we had TV and stuff, but it wasn't. I feel like now you can see everything, know everything. So you already know. You already know what galaxies look like and nebula look like. I did not know that. I knew what the planets might look like. We have pictures of that when we're kids, but once I got past our solar system, there's those, we've seen now in Hubble telescope and all these images, like these giant star nurseries and nebula and spinning galaxies. And this is just, again, so overwhelming for me. I'm like, wow, like, and I'm like basically just like I was at that window. I'm like glued to the wall, just like looking at everything because it's so amazing. And eventually we get out pretty far, and this is all really quick though. Relatively, it feels like minutes to me. It's not a very long experience. And we get out and they say, well, look at this over here. And they direct my attention to this, again, the brightest light. Again, sort of like that window, but now it's in space. And it's this, I can tell it's like a cluster of lights actually, but it's shining as like one bright giant light. And it has that same feeling of like, I just want to be there. That is all that matters right there. That is the center of all things. And that's what I call it now, is the center of all things. And it's just this massive cluster of super beautiful, amazing lights. And out of that is spiraling in either direction and opposite rotation, all of the galaxies, all of the nebula, all of the stars, all of the, multiple solar systems and everything beyond understanding of how massive. And it's like an hourglass, but it's on its side, right? It's sort of like three-dimensionally, it's filling up all the space like a figure eight also, but that would be the flattened vision of it. And I'm just seeing all of that detail and I'm understanding this. This is the shape of the universe, they're telling me. This is how it's all laid out. That is the center, that is source. Like this is pretty close to your understanding of God, they're telling me. And then on the outer end of one of the figure eights, one of the sides of the hourglass, way out in the boonies, they point to it and they say, that's where you live. That's Earth. That's your solar system. That's the Milky Way. Like it's way, and I mean, it's like out towards the end. And I'm like, wow, that's really far away from the center. And they're like, yeah, like that's why you're there. I'm like, oh, okay. Right. I just didn't think of things in this way, and I didn't think of the universe in this way. I did not think of the shape of the universe in this way. If you would have asked me before this to guess, I would have said like, well, it's probably a globe, right? Everything else is a globe. And since then too, I've actually found there are people who believe that the sort of meta universe, however you want to describe it, is that shape. So I'm like, well, wow. I mean, like physics is coming to possibly this conclusion actually too,
You
which
can
is really
say,
cool.
I know it. I know it. I saw it.
Right. I actually experienced it.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, it's time to go home, and we zoomed back to that really distant area in the rural parts of space and time faster than we had gone out. I really think they went out slowly just to let me have that experience, but we were just back in like an instant. And the Earth appeared in front of me, but it turned into like still a globe, but covered with little tornadoes is what it looked like as though you were seeing a tornado from the top. It's a spiral energy, but there's uncountable spirals, and they're side to side, they're just filling all of the space of the earth. And I was like, that's really weird. At first, I was like, oh, is there just storms everywhere? And they're like, no, no, no. This is just your way back in. And they were like, which one do you want to go in? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. How would I know which one to go in? Can you help me choose? And they're like, of course, these are different times and lives and timelines are right, like ways that your life can go. And so this one, or I said, well, which one is of the highest good for myself and everyone else? Which one is the best for all of us? And they were like, this one. And I could tell they had this like twinkle of like pride as well, right? Because I was just naive to what was even happening. And that was just my genuine impulse, was to choose the one that could be best, not just for me, but for everybody. And in the moment, I really think I meant like my family and my friends, but I said everyone. And when I think about that impulse too, I really feel that impulse in myself as well. Like I wish the whole world, I wish every single human will have their highest expression and their highest experience possible. So I know I meant that at some level as well. And they were like, yeah, it's this one. And I just dropped into it. And it was so interesting because at this point I'm back and it very much feels more like waking life. It's still very lucid, but I'm like quickly zooming back to my body, but I'm somewhere else, maybe in the atmosphere or who knows what. And as I'm moving back, I see this timeline and it's going in reverse. And this is probably 1996. Let's just say, I'm not sure exactly, but so I was about 14 or 15 or who knows what around that age. And I am seeing 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, which in 1996, I'm not even considering 2020 or 2021. Like I'm not aware of this at all. And as I'm seeing these numbers count backwards and as I'm noticing I'm getting closer to my house, I'm also seeing just sort of random scenes sprinkled along the way. And as quick as it went, I seem to have absorbed all of them pretty easily. And when I got back to my body in my bed and woke up, I was like, that is the craziest dream I've had crazy dreams, really intense, really detailed, but like that is the most intense dream I've ever had. And I wrote about it in my journal a bit. I don't know if I even do it justice because I'm just like also still a teenage girl, like worried about boys and clothes and like going to school and grades and all of these things. But it's the same sort of experience where I have this deep sadness. Like I just want to kind of go back there, like that source place. What was that? What was this light that was so powerful? I just want to be with that. Who are these beings that are taking me? Or like, what was that all about? And so interesting. I shortly after went to the library and I found a Nova film and I don't remember which one or what it was called, but it was something about space or, the universe. And I put it in and I was watching it by myself. And I got to a place where they were showing sort of the star nurseries or the nebula. And I like stopped in my tracks and I was like, I didn't know that was real. That I thought that was just in my dream, but here are these images that are exactly what I saw. And I thought to myself, is it possible that I actually went out and saw all of that somehow? And right then there was so hard to describe. It was literally an explosion of energy on a tiny, tiny scale, like 2 feet in front of my face. I saw the light of it. Like it was not metaphysical. It was a physical thing that happened. And I was like, wow. And I actually ran to my bed, which people who've listened to me long enough know that I run to my bed and hide under the covers many times I'm having a paranormal experience because it's overwhelming for me. And that was one of them. I was scared actually of what that even meant or what is exploding in front of me and like, what is life? What is reality? Where are we? What's going on? So it was very reality shifting and shaking to have that sort of confirmation that something actually happened. It was not just a dream. And obviously, since then, I've understood it much more deeply. But at the time, it was crazy. It was unsettling, actually.
I would imagine. When I hear stories similar to yours is so interesting to me. The first thing I think about is, why did this happen to you? And I know you know the answer to that now. And it looks like to me that your team, probably the beings on the ship, that's your soul family or your team or whoever you hang with when you're not here in physical on earth needed to start waking you up. So can you talk a little bit? And I have so many questions. This is just the first one. I believe that the experiences that people similar to you that have, and they're all different, they're all extraordinary. It is as much for you as it is for the rest of the planet. I mean, clearly there's a big effort right now to wake up humanity. So can you talk a little bit about what you have learned since then, working with your guides, which I'm sure you're very, very communicative with, about what it is that you experienced and why it was important and what you are here to do?
Yeah. It's such a great question. And at this time in my life, what is hard for many people to understand is I was very depressed and very traumatized, and I had CPTSD and didn't know it. Had a really, really rough childhood. I came into a very dysfunctional family. They're beautiful. They love me. We love each other. We've healed a lot. But at the time we were living in poverty. We were sometimes homeless. My father was an alcoholic. So there's a lot of disruption. I was tortured by a dentist when I was young for many years, ongoing, and I had to keep going back to him, and no one understood what I was trying to tell them, that it wasn't right, something was wrong. They just thought I was too sensitive and being a baby, and he actually was just never giving me Novocaine. So horrible level of torture, and that caused a lot of dissociation. And so I really had this internalized self hatred, actually. Like, I just thought I wasn't worth anything. And so I did a lot of drugs, and I did a lot of, risky behaviors, and a lot of growing up too fast, and horrible things that I did to myself over my teenage years. And part of that experience too was to, like you said, wake me up. And part of that waking up is waking up to your own value, my own value. When I asked myself the same question, why is this happening to me? And I knew the answer was because I have a mission, because I am here for a reason, because have this role to play. I was like, oh, not me. No, never me. I'm not worth anything. I'm not valuable. That's not possible. So part of it was that, right, awakening me to my own value, my own self-worth, and reigniting love within my heart, which I had really separated from. My father died when I was 11 too, so that was kind of the nail in the coffin of trauma. And I was like, well, God doesn't exist, love doesn't exist, everything's horrible, and there's no point to life. Really dark stuff. And I didn't smile, I didn't laugh for years and years and years. And these things then started happening to me. And so it was also that, right? It was that self-healing process, and that realization that there's something bigger for you to live for also, if you can't live for yourself, but also awakening to the nature of this reality, the nature of who
Yeah,
and what we are. Yeah.
I was going to say that if you're here for a mission to help with the awakening of humanity, being really clear on how gritty things can get on this planet is important
Yeah.
because it makes the mission, it solidifies the importance of the mission.
It's so well said. Yeah. You really, there's no one who can come to me and have any experience that I can't relate to, because I've been through all of it too, right? All of it, from abusing myself, abusing others, being abused, right? All of these layers of darkness. And I've had to heal from all of them. And I'm not saying that I perfectly understand everyone's experience, because they are all different, but the nature of it, I can be there with it. Right. And I think that that's so important. When you are healing yourself, you are then able to share that with the world, because the world makes sense to you. There's no experience that doesn't make sense to you, and you also know how to reclaim that, right? And that all of it is valuable, actually. There's nothing that we can leave out. There's no one that we can leave out, because every single piece of it really does matter, just like it did for ourselves. And so this personal healing journey that I was propelled down has become the journey to then also share healing with everyone else. They're the same thing, actually, when you really get down to it. And I have so many people ask me again and again and again, well, how do I get in touch with my spiritual skills, and how do I step into my spiritual path? And I say the same thing every time, like, it starts within. And what that really means is it starts with you healing anything you can, everything you can, because you have to reclaim all of yourself in order to reclaim the world. And
Yeah.
That's the
And if you're
beauty.
so busy putting Band-Aids on all these wounds, it's hard to focus on a broader issue
Yeah.
if we're always just like trying to self-heal in any situation. I'm curious on, so you have these incredible OBs, and I have such a sense of, oh, familiarity with your story, or it just seems so real to me. How did you then start connecting with your guides after that? And when did that sort of come online? I would imagine that you're very connected now, but how did they come in and start leading you in a way that was going to help you do what you came here to do?
Yeah. It's really complicated because actually they were the whole time, right? And I can look back and I can see that. I can see the signs and the synchronicities were always them being like, "Hey, we're still here. We're still on track. Like, keep going. Go this way, now go that way." And so everything that I did was guided. And I also can look back and see how perfectly timed everything was with whatever I needed to heal in myself, but also what I could give to others while doing it. And so my whole life has been about what can I do to help or what can I do to make things better, even as I'm like barely struggling through it and barely putting the pieces together and having these, right, the PTSD and the health issues and all of this stuff. But at the same time, doing my best to help others. So I was guided to become a teacher. I spent many years in classroom teaching and as I'm doing that, I'm having these experiences and I'm moving towards other things and where I'm at now. And what's really interesting too is along the whole way I've had this connection pretty visually at first and now much more psychically and intuitively with these beings which people might call star beings or they might call ETs or they might call whatever and I like to call them wogies because they are that's one of the Native American traditions words for them that I came across, and I was like, "Oh, wogies, I finally have a word." Because in that tradition, they had the same understanding I have that they're not actually in these physical craft, and they're not necessarily from a certain star system, except in that that star system represents, again, an aspect of consciousness that they're here having fully crystallized in themselves to help humanity attune with. Right? And so these beings started communicating with me long, long ago, around the same times that I was having those OBEs and starting to really come back online, maybe you might say. And they would just flash in the sky, but they would do it in insane ways that weren't possible physically, right? So I had to notice and I couldn't dismiss them. And I just had to start realizing again, something is happening. It's probably connected with these other weird experiences I've had. It's definitely trying to communicate with me. I had to work through some fear for a while around it because that again was terrifying for me, just like everything else was along the way. And, eventually I started realizing that they're psychic. They don't just flash and get my attention, but they can also respond to my thoughts, sort of like that explosion did when I was watching the Nova episode, right? In a synchronistic sort of fashion, it's confirming like, "Yeah, you did actually go to the center of the universe." And these were the same. I would ask something and they'd very clearly respond to what I was asking in my mind, and so I started realizing they're communicating with me psychically, and this is over years and years we've just developed this relationship, and I can started realizing they appear in the day as well as the night. They're not just lights in the night sky, they're also various representations in the day, and they're not one shape or form. They can be whatever they need to be in order to communicate or get attention or, share information. And so that I've come to realize is also my guides and allies. And in again, a very, like, physical seeming way or present, at least in a way that I couldn't ignore. It's easy for us to ignore the thoughts that might be kind of coming through from our intuition or our psychic connection. It's easy for us to ignore the feelings or even our gut feelings, right? If we want to, we can just not pay attention to that, or we can be so distracted with the day, or we can be so, focused on whatever we're doing that we can just not connect with it and ignore it. It's a lot harder to ignore a bunch of lights flashing in the sky or like something else, right? Like that.
Particularly if
So,
other people are seeing them too.
yeah, which would happen a lot too. And it was interesting with that. It's the same with my experiences I try to share with people. Some people really wanted it and wanted to hear about it and wanted to try to understand it with me. And other people were like, don't. talk to me about this. Like, don't go there. And I had this really profound experience with these wogies or these star beings, my spiritual guides and allies, where they came down very close. And I had 5 people in the car with me when they did this. And it started with I just noticed a really bright light in the sky, and I was kind of like, is that them? And then it disappeared. And I was like, it was probably them. They were just saying hello. But then there was just a light right next to me. I was on a ferry boat. And so the windows in the car holding area are just holes to the outside world. And this light was just right outside that window. Our car is right next to the window. And so it's just feet from my face. And I'm like, that's weird. I don't think that light was there before. And then it became 3 lights. They just kind of moved out from each other. And I was like, well, that's definitely not a physical. It's not a boat. It's like that doesn't happen in reality. So this is clearly them. They've never been this close before. And they started moving in synchronized motions, and they started moving faster and faster, and they changed colors for each shape. And so at first maybe it was a circle, and then it was a triangle, and then it was a square, and then it was a star, and then it was, and at some point they were moving so fast and changing colors so fast, and I couldn't tell what the shape even was, and I'm just transfixed. At some point they then blink off, and I look at everyone else in the car, and they're all staring. They had been staring at it too, so they all saw it too. And I was like, well, what was that? And no one responded. And these lights, I shouldn't have said they clicked off. They became back to just one light, I think it was. And they zoomed up forward to the front of the ferry boat. We were moving this whole time. And when they got to the front, the boat stopped. So clearly the driver, also the captain, saw these lights also, because the boat, it was nighttime. The boat just stopped. And you have to, if you know, boats, if you think another boat is coming by, you have to stop so you don't hit them. And the lights, I don't know where they went from them because I didn't see them, but the boat stayed stop, and they turned on their spotlight and they were looking, because in their mind there had been a boat and then it was gone. And so they're thinking someone just capsized or something. We have to find the survivors. No one obviously was there. And the boat just kept going. There was no announcement ever. And I again was like, well, did you guys see this? Like, what is this? And one person was like, it was the Coast Guard. I was like, I don't think that was the Coast Guard. And they're like, it was the Coast Guard. And no one else said anything. And no one would say anything. And I kept asking. And finally I realized no one is going to respond to me. They did see it. One person saying it's the Coast Guard, and no one else is saying anything. And eventually I would ask them, like, do you guys remember that thing? And no one would respond to it. It was like I wasn't even there. The one person who had said it was the Coast Guard finally, after pestering for how long, finally broke down and said, okay, yes, I remember. Now just never talk about it again. And I was like, wow.
Isn't
So
that interesting?
yeah.
And do you think that has more to do with where they are in their personal evolution, or how strong the narrative is on this planet for our lack of connection?
Yeah. I think it's both, right? I think as we heal more and we open more and we understand more of who we are, we can sort of take more. And I think this is also part of why when people are like, well, why do you have all these experiences and I don't? And I'm like, I think I'm just more open to or capable of not breaking down under the right. If reality is so different than what we're told, that's
Yeah.
shattering, right? That can be psychologically traumatic.
And I think that you just said it. Reality is so different than what we've been told. So I want to move back to when you were looking at the infinity sign, or the hourglass on its side. So you're seeing all this, and Earth is out there, just way out there. And I've heard that before. That's a real confirmation. We
Ah,
are we are kind of an outpost. We're just way out there. We're a great stopping over point for people who are traveling. We don't get very direct access to that light, to the source light.
yes.
Do you think that this reality system was created in this location so that it was a lower, denser reality? Or do you think that it's a lower, denser reality because we're so far away from the source light?
I would kind of say both. I think energy goes to where it fits. And it's sort of like this is like even our body system is the same, right? Like, well, this piece needs to go to the liver and that needs to go to the bloodstream. And that's just where it vibrates with, right? Like that's its sympathetic vibration. That's where it's sort of drawn to. So I would say we do, from my understanding, have less direct access to that source line because of where we are and how things move. And every once in a while, we get these alignments or these kind of breakthroughs, and that's when we get like 2012 or like these different things where suddenly things just sort of jump up in consciousness.
Which we're going into right now. We're going
Yeah.
into a more direct access to the light from the central sun is what I've been told. Not that I've been out in the space to see it, but
Yeah, no, that's what I experience as well, is that we're getting a more direct access. And part of that is going to come through, I think, like, and so I get messages now, I channel messages through from my guides and allies and get more direct, sort of just like word for word, here's what's going on. And they've said that, we're moving towards a time where something like a giant burst of electricity or magnetism is going to hit us like a wave, and this will be so intense that some people, and it's not as negative as it sounds. Some people won't be ready for it though, and it'll sort of the way it looks to me is that like it burns them to a crisp, but that sounds way more intense than I think the experience is. I think the experience is much more like you just sort of pop out and you're like, well, I'm done with that experience,
yeah,
right? Just like when you transition
yeah,
from this life into other realms, it's not a punishment, it's not painful, it's just some people aren't going to be quite ready for receiving that
yeah.
level
So
of
they're on
upliftment.
to another journey. They're on to
Right.
another part of their journey.
Another part of their journey that's exactly perfect for where they're at, just like all of us always have been. And so the rest of us have been and are ready to receive that. And even if
Yeah.
it might be kind of overwhelming or you might want to hide under the covers like I do, it's really positive and really beautiful and really transformative. So it's interesting. I think that a lot of people have a lot of fear around earth changes or what's going on in the world and all of this. And I think that's another thing that kind of makes it hard sometimes to be here and talk with people and be a part of people's. I'm like, "Oh, none of that's scary at all." Right? Like
Yeah.
none of that even matters. Like, cause
I'm
I
like ready.
know.
I was
Yeah.
ready, a while ago. Let's get on with this.
Right. Let's get this game on the road. So, and that's what I think is so beautiful is that alignment is just natural. It happens in cycles. And just like in our body, like some things are now ready to be healed and other things are still going to take their time to sort out some more toxins and whatever. And it's just this natural sort of evolution or growth that we're going through. And so, yeah, I think many of us came here for this time to help more and more people be ready for that and to help everyone get in their place, and to have their understanding and to not be scared by it as much as possible. And again, to heal as much internally, because the more you're healing of your emotional, your mental, and your physical body, the more prepared you are for anything, let alone like a
Mhm.
jump up in consciousness, right?
And the more you can stand in your own personal power and your sovereignty and really believe in yourself,
Yeah.
believe I'm right where I need to be. I'm right where I'm prepared to be. This is my time. I'm curious. I want to talk with you about information, and I know you get downloads from your guides. This is a question I have. I've had experiences where I get an incredible amount of information
Mm.
dropped into my head, and I understand it completely immediately, not only from a factual standpoint, but I understand the emotional component as well. And it's instantaneous. This happens to a lot of people. I'm sure it happens to you all the time. My question is, how does that happen? Is it information that is in our field and then the door just gets pulled back so now we can access it? If it's someone, some other entity dropping that information in, how do we integrate it so immediately? I'm curious about that. Have you ever thought about that? And what do you think it is?
Yeah, I see it actually, and I've sort of felt it intuitively as well, and I've come to sort of understand it. I'm maybe going to keep going back to the body because it's such a handy metaphor. Or no, what's even better is that alignment we were just talking about. How the universe, however it's spinning, and whatever's over here, and whatever was blocking, and that moves out of the way, and now the light just kind of can shine through directly. It's a lot like that. It's like we actually already had hundreds of these little pieces that were just kind of slightly off, and then something comes in to just draw them all together. And it's like, oh, that's what this all, oh, that's what's going on. That's why we
Yeah.
understand it so deeply and fully, is we actually already were on the verge of all of the pieces of it, and then it all came together.
Yeah.
So very rarely is it something completely foreign that no aspect of we had ever had any sort of right background for or closeness to. And so that happens too. But a lot more often it's like this, where we actually, it was just like in our subconscious almost. It was just sort of on the wings and it was sort of waiting. And then it's just vast amount of light is shined upon it.
And the difference for me is, and you can tell me how it is for you, I'm sure it's probably similar, is it's not something I think this, it's no, I know this.
Yes.
It is no, there, I know this. This is a fact. And that's the assuredness is surprising for a human because we're all, I think as a species, we're kind of uncertain a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably for good reason. It's really similar to people will ask me, like, well, should I be with the person I'm with? And is it the right fit? Or should I be at this job? Is it the right fit? And it's hard because for now it probably is. That's why you're there. But also the fact that you're wondering means it's like it's not the highest, it's not the perfect, it's not where
Or
you'll get to,
and
right?
you're on your way to something else if you're asking that question.
Yes. Because
Mhm.
otherwise you just know. When I finally met my soulmate, which was only about 5 years ago, I'm 42, I just knew. But there was nothing about me that questioned it at
Yeah.
all.
It's
There
like,
was
"Oh,
some,
there they are."
oh, there you are. Oh, I've been
Yeah,
waiting for you. Oh, okay.
yeah,
This is great. Yeah.
yeah.
And there was some parts that were more like, how are we gonna make this work, or what is gonna happen? Or, there was other things that were unsure, but this connection was not.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt at all. And it's the same with those downloads. If you're questioning some part of it, that part probably isn't quite perfected in its knowledge yet. That piece is still waiting. Most of it might be totally true, but maybe just some little bit is just slightly out of sync. When that falls in and you just know it, you do just know it. You have no doubt. And there, it's different. We technically can fool ourselves and we're like, oh no, I just know. But at some point inside of us, we're like, I don't know. I actually just really want it to be this way. And I'm really hoping it's this way. And like, come on, life, it's this way, right? That stuff we have the tendency. And so to know ourselves is really important, to know our own bias and to know our own temptations or possible shortcomings is really important.
Mhm.
But those moments when you just know.
You
Yeah.
just know. Yeah, and there's no second guessing it. It
No,
just is.
it just is.
So now that you're down the road a little bit, you had those experiences when you were a teenager. You've increased your communication with your guides. You're seeing white lights. I love that. I want to hang out with you and see them too. What tell us about the work you're doing now? Like how have you integrated this? And tell us what your mission is because my sense is that you're very sure at this time and you realize I'm here in a human physical form to help raise the consciousness of the planet, and I'm going to do it in these ways. So, talk to us about what you're doing right now and how that's working for you and the people you're working with.
Yeah, thank you. I want to say too, just I've always been, like I said, trying to help people. And even when I was like a cashier, I was like, well, I'm going to try to make people smile today. When we're interacting, I'm going to make eye contact and try to just have some sort of connection. And when I was a teacher, it's like, well, I love teaching, obviously, but I also really genuinely want to help my students find higher levels of themselves and expression and healing and wellness. And so it was all sort of a natural evolution again as I'm healing myself and healing people as much as I can. And finally, even though along the way I would do tarot and I would do what I now look back on and see as sort of deeper levels of healing, although it wasn't always presented in that way, but like someone would come to me and be like, oh, there's this and this and this, and we would just work together and then they'd leave, like, oh, okay, it's better now, it makes sense now. And so these things were sort of always happening, but then I was finally led to leave teaching, which I didn't expect at all. It was very much of like kind of burning my whole life down and just jumping into the unknown and trusting. And I tell people I literally would say to myself and to God, my conception of God and source, like, I'm yours. Like, you tell me what to do. I've long since understood that I'm here for some reason and that it's all unfolding. And so I just will trust that you're going to put it in front of me or make me know what I'm supposed to do. And apparently, I was supposed to leave teaching, sell my house, sell my car, leave the person who I thought I was in love with. Uh, and get into a van and drive around the continent. And that did not make sense to me. I was like, how am I going to be helping or serving people? And it was like, just do it, just go. And that's how I met my soulmate. And that's how I found this place that I live now. And that's how I started understanding, well, I'm supposed to actually be doing something different than teaching, although I am still teaching.
Yeah.
And so I started kind of being more open about the spiritual things that I had always been kind of doing, but not sort of in a professional capacity or offering it to the general public, because that was what was put in front of me. And my guides and allies were kind of constantly screaming it at me, like, you need to start offering at least tarot readings to people, at least this, and you need to start exploring the other aspects of your gifts, which I didn't think I had. I didn't think I
Yeah.
had, the ability to channel, and I didn't think I had the ability to help people heal, and I didn't think I had the ability to bring their soul into this space where they can receive so much from their own connection. And those are not things that I thought I had the ability to do. But when I looked back, I see that I had actually been dropped in the lap of various shamans and various spiritual teachers, and that actually I'd been given all the tools all along. I just didn't know that they were for me. And so I could kind of bring together all these things that I'd always been sort of around and seeing and learning about and being taught about, and do them. And so I started offering blessings to people. I started offering tarot readings, which are not just tarot readings. Like, we really are a blessing. Energy is coming through, and messages from guides and allies are coming through as we go. And then I started offering ceremonies, and I call them now spiritual guidance sessions, where people come in with anything they can tell me or not tell me, and it's mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, or otherwise. And they're just placed into what I call the soul space, and the light comes, and their guides and allies come, and I'm not even doing anything except describing what's happening and what I'm seeing or hearing or understanding. But this work is being done by their soul and their guides and God, source, again, whatever people want to call it. And people have had physical healing occur for them, and mental and emotional healing occur for them. And honestly, I feel like I've just been along for the ride. Like,
Mhm.
I don't tell people I can heal you or I can do this. I just say, let's connect. And I know whatever is meant to come through will come through. And I know that whatever you're meant to receive, you'll receive. And I know that it will help you get clearer in your journey, clearer in your path, heal more and more on every level. That's what I know. How will it actually look for you? It's so different for each person. And then past lives started coming up, and soul retrieval started happening. And so now, then I was eventually, my guides were again like yelling and screaming at me, like, you need to offer past life readings. And I kind of was like, well, why? I mean, like, I get, every time I've had a past life memory come up, it's been really traumatic and really dark stuff, like the wounds that needed to heal. And that's what they kind of were telling me, like, everyone has those. And so this is another aspect of healing, is to help people connect with the parts of themselves that were stuck somewhere, right? And kind of locked in, and release that. And so I started offering past life readings and healing, and so that's how it sort of progressed. And again, every step of the way was just sort of like them pushing me like, come on, keep going, keep going. And even though I love it and I want it, there's always been some part of me that's like, why, or what for? Why me? Or like, am I really even good at this? I don't even know if I can do this, And again, I think that's part of what they like, sort of like that naive moment where I was like, I don't know, the one that's best for everyone. Right? They like that about me. They're like, yeah, you
You're
don't
so
think you're so
human.
right. I'm so human, and I'm fallible, and I'm also accidentally humble sometimes, to the point of stubbornness. Like,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
me, right?
Yeah. Even though you signed up for this.
Literally.
Literally, literally. So before we close out, I want to ask you, and this is kind of I'm putting you on the spot. I think about this a lot, Lindsay. Where do you think we are in the awakening process here on the planet?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I just had this understanding click into play. I just got the download, so to speak. And I work this way often. It's like the question has to be asked to me for it to come through. So, just like we were talking about how the download itself happens, there's all these pieces that are just kind of out there. You're kind of almost unaware of them. They seem like they're not kind of in flow, but then all of a sudden, it's all just there. That's exactly where we're at right now. There's all these pieces that seem kind of like I was saying when I'd come back from those experiences, like, how are we ever going to get across this abyss? It's so far away. But
Yeah.
this is what it looks like to us right now. It looks like what? We've got world wars and famine and crazy psychopaths and all this stuff. But it's like that. It's actually all these things in place, billions and billions of consciousnesses and different aspects and timelines and whatever that are just waiting for that push. And then it's all aligned and it'll be just like we're told is the best way to manifest, right? Like, don't focus on how. Don't worry
Yeah.
about the how. Just keep seeing that eventuality that we all make it, actually, that we have reclaimed everything and brought it into the light.
Yeah. Well, I'll be there with you. Exciting times ahead. So, Lindsay, how can we find out more about you?
I am at rogueways.org, which is ways as in pathways, not as in ocean waves. So rogueways.org is the best place to see all my books. There's channeled inspirational source messaging books. There's also fictional novels that are channeled and really, really exciting. They have to do with the yugas, the Kali Yuga and the golden and dark ages and how humanity progresses through those. Those are all there. You can also get them from Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or Audible. If you get them from me, you just get a nice little channeled message, short and sweet. I also have orgone that I create there. I have these really beautiful orgone lotus votives and also these pillars that I create. And these are just
Oh,
high energy,
gorgeous. Ooh,
packed in.
I'm getting me one of those.
They're so nice. And if there's ever not one to someone's, liking, or I'm just like out of inventory at the moment, I do custom ones as well. So people can order and put in kind of what their intentions and what sort of energies they want in it. Or even colors, and I can pull one of those through into this dimension for them. So those are all there in the shop. My show Rogue Ways is linked to from there, and all the different places you can see that. And then you can book sessions with me. And I also teach courses like the Dream Walking course. So lots of stuff to do, interact with, and come find out. It's all at rogueways.org.
Wonderful. And I'll have all that information linked in the description box down below. Lindsay, this has been so fascinating. I hope you'll come back and see us again sometime.
Anytime. Thank you so much for asking such good questions.
Thanks for being here. Bye now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one, or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.